Picking up on something Danny said earlier, good cities don't happen by accident. Good cities happen by design. My name's Ali Grehan, I'm the Dublin City Architect, and I want to talk to you today about the design of cities and design in cities. They're two sides of the same coin. The design of cities is about the strategy, and design in cities is about the outcome of that strategy. I'm going to present in three parts, but essentially my point is that design connects cities, and more connected cities are more competitive cities. The first thing I'm going to talk about is how cities are our future. I mean, Danny talked about how Ireland is going to grow. Well, if we're going to be a population of 10 million by 2050, two-thirds, or three-quarters actually, 75%, are going to be living in urban areas. So how are we going to design for that growth? And we need to embrace it as an opportunity. We cannot see it as a threat. The second thing I want to talk to you about is the complexity of cities and how design can manage that complexity. I'll be using some examples of cities that have applied a design-led approach. Medellin in Colombia, Paris, and some projects that Dublin City Council are working on, Ballymun and Parnell Square. And of course, the third point is a unifying framework that can help us negotiate complexity. I'll be mentioning Dublin City Council's Pivot Dublin platform, which is a design promotion platform initiated during the depths of our economic crisis in 2009, and which Enda Kenny, the Taoiseach, was so good to support when it took flight in 2011. So, all good things flow to the city. This was said by Pericles, the Mayor of Athens, in 431. Cities have always been centres of innovation and growth, because cities are people magnets. Today, more than half of the people in all of the world live in cities, and as our population rises, we are becoming more and more urbanised. Cities hold the key to solving problems of our age: climate change, peak oil, and the inequitable distribution of resources. Managing urban growth is one of the most important development challenges of the 21st century, from housing, infrastructure, transport, energy and employment, to essential services such as education and healthcare. So we do need to see urbanisation as an opportunity, and one that will make our world fairer. It'll make our rural and urban areas fairer. And we need to manage this growth by design. Just as competitiveness is a holistic concept, so too are cities. City issues are dynamic and interdependent, a factor of scale and complexity and context. You cannot just take one solution in one city and think it's going to work in another. You have to really understand the context of each city, each country. But design can help us understand that complexity, find appropriate solutions and avoid costly mistakes. Medellin in Colombia it's Colombia's second city, and it has a population of about 3.5 million people. Its development has always been forward-looking and industrious. By the late 70s, it became a victim of its success, and the city was overwhelmed by poverty and crime. It was the murder capital of the world. But by 2012, it was named the world's most innovative city by the Wall Street Journal and Citibank. How this happened was it was a mixture of ideas and bricks. It got access to finance through the city's public utility company. It located public buildings, the best types of public buildings, linked to a social welfare programme in the city's poorest areas, and it constructed public transport, a new metro system in the city centre, connected to the outlying areas by a cable car system. This was particularly appropriate to Medellin because of the city's topography. When we talk about cities, we actually talk about regions. metropolitan areas. Paris as a region dominates the French economy, but the problem for Paris is that it's not actually designed as a region. The city of Paris has a literal and psychological ring around it. And the inner suburbs and outer suburbs, where most of the people live, are fragmented into hundreds of administrative areas. And this is undermining quality of life, and this in turn is undermining, or threatening to undermine, Paris's competitiveness. The riots that started in France in 2005, well, they started in the suburb of Clichy-sous-Bois and spread to other poor suburban neighbourhoods and French cities. Discrimination, poverty and unemployment were blamed as the cause. The Métropole du Grand Paris, called Grand Paris project, it's a vastly ambitious connector project. It's been 15 years in the making, and it's going to take at least another 15 years to implement. It's about creating a new image of Paris and the region. The underlying social ambition is that poor people in poor suburbs, like Clichy-sous-Bois, will belong to the same Paris as people in the 7th arrondissement. So it has two pillars. One, the easy part, will cost about 26 billion, and it's a public transport and infrastructure project. It's an urban development project. It includes a modernised and expanded rail, metro and light rail network. New urban centres will be built around the new stations. I think there are about 72 new stations. And it will also include the construction of about 70,000 new homes per year. But that's actually the easy part. The more fundamental pillar, and the one that has been very controversial, is the creation of a new Greater Paris Regional Authority and coordinating structure to plan and finance and implement this new infrastructure. There has been huge resistance to the proposal to create this Greater Paris Authority, but because of legislation that was passed in 2013, it looks like on the 1st of January 2016, this entity will be formed, and Paris will become less bureaucratic, fairer, and a more attractive place to do business. Ballymun is a project I worked on before I became city architect. I was chief architect out in Ballymun. Ballymun was a really great idea. It was a new town built in response to a housing crisis on the edge of Dublin. But unfortunately, the approach adopted was singular. I mean, it was to create good quality homes, and I think the homes that were created were good quality, but it was an urban design failure. Like so many estates built around the world at the time, it was 100% public housing. Were 5,000 homes constructed around a roundabout. It was a dead end. Little was provided in the way of amenity, civic or commercial infrastructure. The killer blow came in 1985 when, with the best intentions, a national programme was introduced to encourage public tenants to buy their homes. But unfortunately in Ireland, if you live in a flat as a public tenant, you cannot buy that flat. You can buy a house. So anybody in Ballymun flats who wanted to buy had to move out. They had to move to a house and buy a house. So that started a cycle of decline, and in 1997 we decided to redevelop Ballymun. This time we tried to design it properly in every aspect: physical, economic, social, cultural. And hopefully this time the development will last more than 30 years, the buildings, and Ballymun can achieve its strategic potential in the place it occupies, which is this golden rectangle between the airport and the city centre. Another very interesting project we're doing in Dublin City Council, which is design-led, is the Parnell Square Cultural Quarter project. It's unusual for Dublin in that it's being philanthropically funded by US real estate investors Kennedy Wilson. And Kennedy Wilson aren't funding this project because of its wonderful purpose as a 21st century city library for Dublin, a UNESCO City of Literature. They're funding it because of its strategic importance to the city. Kennedy Wilson are investing in Dublin, and it's in their interest that Dublin lifts. The strategic design decision behind the Parnell Square Quarter is that it is located at the top of the civic spine, which connects our key historic places. The area around Parnell Square is culturally very diverse, it's very interesting, it's full of potential, but it also suffers from an element of deprivation, which does actually blot the landscape of the North Inner City. So what we're hoping will happen here, and what Kennedy Wilson have really bought into, is that Parnell Square the cultural quarter, will attract people up O'Connell Street and onto the new DIT campus at Grange Gorman, extending the civic spine and making Dublin a city centre more connected, more attractive and better. I think every designer in this room today knows this, that design is optimistic. And it was so good to hear Enda Kenny speak about optimism. Design is optimistic. Through using design, we find a way to negotiate really, really tricky issues. It's also EU policy. Design is the bridge between creativity and innovation. It helps unlock potential. Finally, in my final part, is that I do want to talk about a project that we initiated in 2009 called Pivot Dublin. It's a Dublin City Council design promotion platform, and it was born out of a bid we made for Dublin to be designated a World Design Capital. The bid consisted of a book, a website, and a series of films, and it captured Dublin design potential in all its richness and diversity. Although the bid was unsuccessful, the platform continues to deliver. And our aims are really very simple. It is that we promote design as a resource that can help us adapt, innovate, and grow. That we inspire a culture of interdisciplinary collaboration. That we value our network. We've built up a formidable national and international network. For example, I'm on an international advisory committee to help Taipei put together its World Design Capital programme. Taipei understands that if it is to maintain its status as the second most competitive city in Asia, it needs to embrace design. We also want to offer opportunities to explain, demonstrate, and celebrate design impact, and we want to translate ideas into action through projects. We have to show people how design works. So Pivot Dublin proposes a holistic design-led approach to city development across social, cultural, economic and environmental issues. In a recent initiative called Hidden Rooms, we invited 350 people from all walks of life, members of the public, experts from the private sector, from the public sector, and of course Dublin City Council, officials and our councillors, to come together over 2 days to brainstorm critical issues affecting the development of Dublin. We placed these groups of people in remarkable rooms around the city. And we did that, it was theatrical. We did that so that we could create a level playing field for every group. Everybody could contribute equally. Now, a lot of the questions we asked people to address are not questions that people aren't asking themselves everywhere around Ireland at the moment. I mean, how do we use public space better? How do we deal with disadvantage? How do we actually harness our creative and cultural assets to connect Dublin and our other cities? How do we improve the economic life of the city? How do we make Dublin flow? How do we deal with our housing crisis? How do we get people to really, really embrace apartment living? Do we need an overarching authority to coordinate the critical infrastructure that our towns and cities need? At the moment, it's fragmented across boundaries. And how, of course, do we deal with climate change? So, as I said, it's not that people aren't discussing these issues. My fear is that we are talking about this in isolation. My hope, and especially given what we were discussing today, my hope is that the government will recognise the design opportunity. For example, here's a suggestion. Could the government use a small part of the Urban Development Fund announced by Minister Howland before Christmas This fund is to invest in projects that will provide for the economic, social and environmental development of urban areas. Could I ask that the first project is the development of a design-led strategy for the implementation of that fund so that we can implement our own grand plan? Thank you.